My name is Jennifer Monet Cowley. I'm an artist. I'm a curator. I am a designer. I am an empath, an INFJ, a diehard introvert. Born and raised in Dallas, Texas, native Dallasite. My mother was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I graduated from Skyline High School, went on to University of Texas at Arlington, was an architecture major, transferred to University of Texas at Dallas, where I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Art and Entertainment, Art and Performance rather. I always felt that I was an artist, even when I was a little girl, because from time to time my mother would bring home coloring books, and I don't know if you remember those really giant coloring books. She would bring those home with the new Crayola crayons with the 64 pack with the little sharpener in the back. I would be the first one to crack those open along with the markers and fill up the entire coloring book and color inside the lines. My sister did not color inside the lines. I colored inside the lines and used every single color in that box. Some of my favorite childhood memories was going to Elysian Fields, Texas, where a lot of my mother's family are from, and also going to Benton, Louisiana, which is where my father's family is from. So they're probably maybe about 45 minutes from one another, and just getting dropped off in the heat of the summer. So like in Elysian Fields, they had like 3 channels, so we would just sit and watch television and dance. But when we would get dropped off in Benton, Louisiana, my grandmother lived in this little 4-room house with no running water. She had chickens running under the house. The water was in these barrels, these rusted out barrels. I cannot believe I drank water from those things, but I did. When I think about it, I cringe. And also, with there being no running water, we had to use an outhouse. But what I do remember is that my grandmother, she cooked the best fried chicken and made the best sweet potato pies. So I do remember that. I do remember that. I was supposed to marry Michael. I was supposed to be Mrs. Michael Jackson. Growing up, we had dogs, but after we got married, after my husband and I, Edlin, got married back in '91, we married 30 years in May, I became a cat person. So I have 2 fur babies by default because neither one of them are mine. My career as an artist started almost 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago when I was 20. Actually, way before that, when I was 5. My grandmother, she would frame all the little cards and things that I would make. When she died, they were still in her bedroom, and I was 29 when she died, so those pieces were still up. One of my favorites is when I visited the Modern Museum in Houston back in 2006, and I had an opportunity to see the quilts created by the women of Gee's Bend, Alabama. And I was so inspired by that particular exhibition that I purchased every book that they had in the museum store and came home and did a series based off of those quilts. Yeah, and I was so inspired by those because prior to achieving and obtaining my art degree, I was an architecture major for 3 years. And just learning about the architecture of a quilt was just very appealing to me because I'm very much into geometric shapes and asymmetrical shapes, also symmetry, but it all plays a role in architecture. So just going back and dissecting those quilts and just basing them off of pure shape, it was extremely appealing. When I was in high school, I was into fashion design. So I went to Skyline High School, and they have a design cluster, fashion design cluster. So I was in that for 2 years. So that piqued my interest, but I have always kind of dressed to my own beat. Kind of had my own style and my own way of doing things. So, well, my role as a curator started back in 2018, in September 2018, when I received a text message from Dr. Harry Robinson over at the African American Museum. And I have been affiliated with the museum for maybe 26, 27 years as an educator. So when he sent me the text, he asked if I would be interested in part-time work at the museum. And my response was, it depends. So he said, curator. And I said, okay, I'm intrigued, tell me more. So that's how I became the curator over at the African American Museum. And it started with him wanting me to curate a show for Women's Month of March of 2019. So instead of it being a retrospect, and it was my very first time curating anything, and I did not want it to be a retrospect because I'm extra like that, so I wanted to do something different, and I always like to do something different. So I thought, well, what if I put something together that meant something and not just a retrospect of just female artists showing their work. So my husband, he's very much into headlines and all of that. I don't watch the news, but he was skimming through something and ran across something that Bette Midler said when she was frustrated that Brett Kavanaugh was being confirmed as Supreme Court Justice. And she said that women are the N-words of the world. Most people do not know that she was actually quoting a song from the 70s that John Lennon and Yoko Ono wrote called Women Are the Niggers of the World. So when she said that, she was unintentionally being racist, and also it was a backhanded slap and insult to black women in particular. So came up with the concept to do a show based on that, kind of make it somewhat political but not focus on the negative, and just focus on all the positive that black women, especially black women artists, and what we're doing, especially since we as black female artists, we tend not to get our fair due in the art world. So I wanted to shake things up a bit and use artists that most people may not have heard of before, and mainly use local artists, local female artists, and highlight those artists who may not have had an opportunity to show their work. So that's kind of where it started. And unintentionally, it turned into somewhat of a movement and a sisterhood, which has been a great blessing. But that's kind of how it started. And from there, I met Symmetria Goodson, who is a art attorney, and we had lunch where she just wanted to pick my brain on how I came up with the concept for us too. And in the midst of talking with her, I said, oh my gosh, I have an idea. And she said, whatever it is, I want to hear it. I was like, okay. I said, I have this concept for a couple show where you have two creatives that come together, and she paints something, he paints something, and then they collaborate on something. She said, I love it, I want to sponsor it. I'm like, okay. So in 2020, I curated my second show at Pencil and Paper Gallery, and it was called Claiming Space, Me, You, Us. And that exhibition, or that show, will happen again this year at Sonny House in August. So that was my second show. Third show came about during COVID, where after George Floyd was murdered, and after Breonna Taylor was murdered, and when Amy Cooper gave her Oscar-winning performance at Central Park, involving Christian Cooper, who was a bird watcher at Central Park. And she knew what she was doing. And she used her tears to basically get him in trouble. So I was so angry. I was just thinking, I got to do something. I have to do something my way. So I came up with this concept for an art show called Tears, Weaponized, Devalued, Reconciled, ? Where I wanted to use, at first I just wanted to use white women artists, and have them to create to this narrative. And then I was just completely bothered by that, because I'm like, I can't leave my sisters out. I can't leave myself out because I'm an artist. So it evolved to 12 African American female artists and 12 white female artists painting to the narrative of the weaponized tears of white women, the devalued tears of black women, and if reconciliation is even possible. So this exhibition opened up at the African American Museum in March of this year, and it will be on display until June 26th of this year. So I am very proud of that show, because it's two different sets of women who are still in the same race, which is the human race, still in the same sisterhood, art sisterhood, trying to make a difference in the world, but also in the art world, also in the world as a whole, on trying to come together to combat this thing of racism. And in our own way, I feel like we're making a difference, and we are slowly but surely changing hearts, because there was one young lady who I was mentoring from UTD. She was with me for a week, and she contacted me the last day that she was going to be with me, and she said, Jennifer, I just want to show you something, and by no means am I trying to work my way into this show. And she said, after spending the week with you and talking with you and some of the artists and just listening, she said, I was just completely naive in my privilege. I had no idea, and I'm completely changed. There's no going back for me. So she created this painting that says that naivety is my privilege. And I said, congratulations, girlfriend, you are now in this exhibition. And that's the type of thing that I was hoping for, because that changed the mind of one person. And even if you change the mind of one person, that has a ripple effect, because when you change the heart of one person, they go on to change the hearts or attempt to change the hearts of others, and it just has a ripple effect. So I feel that this show is so meaningful and that it is working, because when I come into the gallery and I talk to people, and even when the other artists are there and they're talking to people, some people they will say, you know, I never really thought about it that way. And we have a video with all the Karens, with all the Karens just being completely extra and so unnecessary. So we have them featured with tissues for their issues. So the show is the exhibition. I keep calling it a show, but it's an exhibition that I would love to see travel nationally, internationally, to help change the narrative of this ugliness called racism, and how the tears of black women and how the tears of white women are viewed differently. The ultimate goal is definitely for it to be seen by more people than just those who live in the Metroplex, for those people to see it all over the state, all over the United States, all over the world, because racism just does not exist just here, because as we know, Meghan Markle has experienced it over in Great Britain. So it exists all over the world, and how quickly we forget that there are black people all over the world. So not just the United States, not just Great Britain, not just Africa, which is a continent, but also in places like India, Turkey, China, all over the world, and racism exists in those places too.
How many pairs of shoes do you own?
Oh my gosh. Maybe around 200, maybe. Don't tell my husband. but maybe.